Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Wildcat, a steamy firefighter romance, MetroGen After Hours Book 1 by Carina Alyce, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, A Date with the Battalion Chief. The first thing Leslie McClunis noticed was the lights. There were weird fluorescent lights in the ceiling. As she slowly regained consciousness, she noticed a hum of machines and the clatter of a hospital. People were busy outside her room, so she guessed she was in the ICU. Too many beeps and too much activity. "You're awake," a voice, sounding very relieved, said. Leslie turned her head painfully and slowly to the right, noting her left arm was full of IVs and lines. There was a hand on her arm. That hand connected to a beautiful, giant African-American man. She cleared her throat. "Do I know you?" "Hilarious, Leslie," he said. "You scared the shit out of me when I got the call." "Nothing could be scarier than my landscapes," Leslie tried to retort. A bunch of cobwebs was in her brain, blanking out whatever had happened. "Which ICU is this?" "MetroGen. You came out of surgery an hour ago. You broke both legs, fractured 4 ribs, and lost your spleen. You still found a way to yell at 3 nurses, though." "You did always want me to slow down. How did it happen?" "Well, while it was all blurry, yelling sounded like her, at least. This is the anesthesia talking. You were at a high-rise apartment fire. I guess the floor above you collapsed and smashed you." "I'm not dead? I should be," she commented, all graveyard humor. "There's my girl's winning spirit." The lovely man, who happened to be her husband, Trevor, smiled. "I guess you were shielded by a table or something." Leslie thought back for a minute, the pieces coming together. She'd been in command of the 24th floor, below the fire on the 25th. 20 firefighters had been under her direct supervision, including one of her most troublesome groups, Firehouse 15. She remembered talking to the fire chief, and then nothing. Was Chief Baker dead or in a bed nearby? "My team? Chief Baker?" I don't know about your team," Trevor answered. "The fire chief is fine. He dug you out himself, and I expect he'll be by shortly to check on his meanest battalion chief." "You love me because I'm mean." She tried for more humor to mask her growing worry. How many of her firefighters were injured? "Every day." Now that she was awake, she definitely believed a floor had fallen on her. Or she was suffering from fear of not knowing what had happened to her people. Commanders cared for their people before themselves. "Trev?" "Yes, Battalion Chief McClunis?" His tone was weary now. "Can you get me Chief Baker now or 10 minutes ago?" "I'll go check for him, but once you talk to him, you're going to take a break," he admonished her sternly. "I'm broke," she said. Trevor carefully leaned over and kissed her forehead. There was a junior nurse off in the corner who stared at this display of affection. "Do you need something?" Leslie growled testily. The nurse flushed. Yeah, keep your eyes on your head," Leslie said. Trevor chuckled and left. Some things never changed. Then, August 1995. The Diary of the Chaplain at MetroGen, August 1995. "I got my first job. I can't believe it." "Calm down. Calm down. I applied for a ton of positions, and I'm going to be the chaplain at Metro General Hospital in downtown Cleveland. Not bad for an Oberlin boy to graduate from Vanderbilt with a Master's of Divinity. Personally, I think they hired me because of my job interview. Not everyone is willing to perform an interpretive Wiccan spiral dance in the hospital conference room. It might have also had something to do with my being the only applicant. The war between Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital is heating up and might have scared off the other candidates. My being straight and Unitarian might have gone in my favor, too. But who cares? I have a job. I can't wait to be home. After 3 half-assed years, the Browns were amazing last year during my 4th year in Tennessee. I have such a great feeling for them in 1995. I have 3 bottles of scotch set aside for when we win the Super Bowl this year. I've got to do something fun now that I'm moving to Cleveland. Bob Ross class, maybe. Chapter 2. A Date with Bob Ross. Only jerks tell women they would get ahead if they acted more feminine. This advice given to her by her fire captain, Eric Cordova, was particularly galling. Leslie McClunis had not survived her probie year at Firehouse 21 to be told by her new captain that acting more feminine would solve her problems. As if any of those mouth breathers knew what feminine meant. To the guys at Firehouse 15, it meant women cooked, cleaned, and were brainless. It meant the only women brave enough to enter their sacred masculine space was subject to misogynistic tricks. Since assigned to Firehouse 15 in June, she'd had 4 flat tires and a broken windshield. When she started walking to work, they peed in her locker. They'd even tried to trap her in the bathroom, but she didn't quit, and they didn't like it. That was their problem, not hers. Yet here she was trying to prove to them that she had some other feminine skill by attending an 8 o'clock Bob Ross art class on a July Friday night. Why they believed painting was a feminine skill was beyond her. It might have been Bob Ross, who appeared to have been a gentle, thoughtful guy, all characteristics Leslie lacked. The artist himself had recently died, but his legacy lived on. She flicked a hand over her short red curls. 2 years ago, she'd had long, flowing locks. Not anymore. They didn't fit in a fire helmet, and short hair was harder to pull. Another person walked by and set up an easel next to her. This someone was huge. By Leslie's estimation, he was about 6'5" and a solid 260 pounds huge. The type that could bench press Leslie's 5'1" and 105 pounds with 3 fingers. The man moved with a surprising amount of grace while removing his leather vest, which revealed a broad expanse of muscle. He took a skull cap out of his pocket and used it to tie back his dreadlocks. Leslie was staring unashamedly. She could hear people tittering around her at this man. He looked vaguely familiar, but it most likely had more to do with his size than anything else. And she liked big men. Despite her male teammates' constant innuendos otherwise, Leslie was not a lesbian. Her men needed to be huge, hung, and not associated with the firehouse. There were only 2 women in her class of 20, and she had no intention of ruining her hard work by sleeping with someone in the department. Firefighters were gossipy little chickens, worse than high school girls. The man noticed her gaze and tried to stare her down. She bared her teeth back at him. His eyes flashed with a spark of interest. Unfortunately for Leslie, their connection was interrupted by their instructor coming out to begin the lesson. He showed whatever wet-on-wet painting meant and droned on about the wonders of happy little trees and happy accidents. Supposedly, a monkey could paint beautiful landscapes with the Bob Ross method. However, Leslie spent a lot of the class imagining what wet-on-wet would mean with that man next to her. Therefore, her non-beautiful landscape ended up being a landscape of a bunch of blobs. Mr. Too Attractive Next Canvas Over seemed to be doing a much better job. He successfully painted an entire mountain scene. The class ended, and people started carrying away their canvases. Leslie, never one to be shy, decided to be bold. "Hey, you!" She got the attention of the man who was putting his vest back on. "Yeah? Want to go get a drink?" She did her best not to leer. He had to be concealing some heft behind those jeans and beat-up white t-shirt. "You want to have a drink with me?" "Why not? I promise I have much better skills than my painting." Most guys rarely asked questions when she wanted to invite one out for a drink. The reasons should have been obvious. He was hot and she was horny. "I need to put my picture away." "I'm putting mine in the circular file." She dropped hers in the trash can. "There's a dive bar 2 doors down. I'm going to order 2 drinks, one for me and one for you. If you don't come by in 15 minutes, it will be 2 drinks for me, and I'll find my own fun without you." His mouth dropped open like a fish. "Do you even know my name?" "Do I need to?" "See you at the bar, stud." Some people who weren't firefighters would argue Leslie was overdoing it. From her perspective, if she was going to fight fires like a man, she was going to screw like a man too. It took him under 5 minutes to meet her at the bar. Leslie was sitting there with the promised 2 shots, a red drink the barkeep created just for her. The man picked up the first. "I don't know why I'm doing this." Leslie drank hers down in a single swallow. "Because I'm cute, loud, and more exciting than Bob Ross." "And tiny." He put one hand on top of hers. He absolutely dwarfed her, letting his palm warm almost her entire forearm. This man could easily take her out however he wanted, but he seemed slightly bowled over by her attitude. "I'm short? I had no idea," she said sarcastically. She ran her other hand up his immense forearm. I'm also very flexible. He loomed over her, tucking her head underneath his chin. Careful, I could break you. I outweigh you by about 150 pounds and 14 inches, she guessed, leaning into his body. You're what, 100 pounds? My fighting weight is 105. I'm almost 3 of you. Yeah, that happens a lot, she said. The average 200-pound man was already 2 of her, but once they were in her bed, they usually forgot about the size thing. I could be a terrible evil mofo. He placed one hand on her back. You could be, but you aren't. What makes you so sure? I've seen assholes, and you're not it. You don't have needle tracks up your arm, and you raised your hand during class. Your vest is nice leather, not fake, and the watch on your wrist isn't cheap. I could be a criminal, he offered. A criminal who spends an excessive amount of time at the gym. She rested her back on his chest. His pecs were most impressive, almost warm steel. A metal she wanted to test up close. She was getting wet in anticipation. His body had to be remarkable. What do you think I do, Columbo? Nothing at a desk for sure. Bodybuilder or personal trainer. You might have a day job in something physical, construction, at the Rock Hall. But when you get home, you work your ass off for that body. Only fair to reward your efforts. She trailed a hand down his jeans. He picked her up and set her on the bar, making her eye level with him. You've got me figured out? She bent forward far enough to touch her lips with his. Is there something wrong with wanting to use your body? Letting you fill me up in every which way? Are you objectifying me? Yes. Are you objecting? Leslie skimmed a foot over his jean-covered thigh. You didn't ask my name yet. Must I? She moved her foot towards his fly, which had a growing bulge. She hoped the barkeep wouldn't toss her again. Yeah, because I like it when my women say it as I give it to them. It's Trevor. He leaned forward to whisper in her ear. And if I'm going to be inside your tight little body, I want to know your name, too. I'm Leslie, and I'm leaving. Get your ass in gear. She hopped down, dropped a 20 on the bar, and headed out. She didn't even check to see if he was following her. She didn't need to, because his enormous presence shadowed her the 4 blocks to her studio apartment. She lived on the first floor of a house chopped up into apartments. It was right next to some new condo construction, which kept her rent cheap. As she opened the door, he asked, I'm not going to find out I need to pay for this, am I? She snorted. If your body is anything like what I imagine, you shouldn't need to pay for it. Women should be beating down the door. Leslie waved him in, and he entered without hesitation.